Well, hi everybody, this is Burke Holland and welcome back once again to HTML5 development for ASP.NET developers. This is the third module in the course. In the first module, we talked about Hello jQuery and we got introduced to the very fundamental aspects of jQuery, specifically selecting things out of a page, elements out of a page, getting their values, setting the value of other elements. It was an essential module to help us get an understanding of how to use jQuery in our environment with Visual Studio. And then the next module we did was Hello Services. And this module is really packed full of a lot of stuff. There was REST, JSON, AJAX, Web API, just about every acronym we could throw in there we covered. But we built on the knowledge that we got in the first Hello jQuery module, and we were able to explore quite a bit in Hello Services. And up until now, we've really laid some serious groundwork that's going to help us do some great HTML5 development. But it's really just been groundwork. It hasn't been specifically HTML5 development. But it was essential that we understand where we're coming from and get some of these basics down before we can really move forward and be effective HTML5 developers. So now that we've kind of laid that out, this module is going to be an introduction to HTML5. And we're really going to define what HTML5 is and what it is not, and kind of try to clear up some of the confusion maybe that is around the buzz term HTML5. There won't be as much code in this module as there will be conceptually trying to understand what HTML5 is and how we can get started with it at a very basic level. So when we talk about HTML5, what is HTML5? Well, HTML5 is really just the web. That's all it is. It's just now more awesome than it ever was before. So we're adding new features. Browsers are capable of new things. But you should know that HTML5 is not a thing. It's not something that you can install on your system. HTML5 is not an IDE and you can't download it. It's not a neat zip package. It's not something that you can open up inside of a studio and run. HTML5 is an overarching term that we use to describe three very specific areas of the web that have moved forward. And these three areas really comprise all of the web. The first one is, of course, HTML. The second one is CSS. And the last one is JavaScript. So with HTML, we're talking about some of the newer things there. Is CSS, we're talking about the new standard for CSS, which is CSS3. And with JavaScript, some of the new APIs for JavaScript that are available in browsers. So when talking about the specific HTML aspect of HTML5, we're really talking about a couple of new things. And one of them is semantics. And semantics is the idea that we have new tags that allow us to lay out a page and also describe what those different sections of the page do. So in the past, we've used HTML specifically to lay out a page visually. But we have new things like accessible screen readers that can go through, and for those who are maybe visually impaired and can't see the page, the accessible screen reader can describe the layout of the page to them if we use semantic tags, and that's very important. Another new thing in HTML is some of the new elements that are available in the newer browsers, and that's things like a canvas or video and audio elements. A canvas is a new drawing surface that's very powerful and hardware accelerated and allows you to create rich games and interactive experiences. The video and audio tags allow you to embed or stream video and audio directly through the web with native controls, and these are things that were really only available with Flash or Silverlight in the past. When we talk about CSS and CSS3, we're talking about things like transformations and transitions and animations, and then there's new layouts. There's a box layout that allows you to lay things out side by side and much easier than it ever was before without using tables. And then other things such as new color standards. We had hexadecimal colors in the past, and then we have RGB and HSL as well. There's a lot of different things in CSS3, but these are just a couple. We're just trying to get a broad idea of what comprises HTML5. And then, of course, the last thing, and what I would consider the most important, is JavaScript. And that's because it really is powering the web. And there's so many new things in JavaScript. jQuery has really opened the doors for JavaScript developers. And in order to be an effective HTML5 developer, I feel like we really need to embrace JavaScript and become very comfortable with it. It's actually a very easy language to learn, it's very forgiving, and it has a whole lot of new features. So any of the real magic of HTML5 is exposed through some sort of JavaScript API, including things like local storage, which allows you to store values in a key value store in the user's browser and then retrieve them, and to things like the History API, which allows us to maintain browser history, which is important in Ajax applications, as we don't want somebody to hit the back button and be completely blown away off our application. And then we have things like WebRTC, which are really bleeding edge, that allow you to stream video directly from the user's webcam or audio directly from their microphone. Really, really bleeding edge and really cool stuff that's kind of on the forefront of HTML5, but is definitely coming soon. The other thing that's very important in HTML5 is that we remember that we have a lot of browsers, and we have a lot of older browsers specifically. And so we have new libraries like Modernizer, which help us to define what our browser is capable of. And then we have these things called polyfills, which allow us to basically plaster over the holes in functionality from older browsers. So we can use Modernizer to detect whether or not a feature is available in a specific browser, and if it's not available, we can use a polyfill to create that functionality in the browser. So now that we have an understanding of what HTML5 is and what it is not, let's open up Visual Studio and take a look at how we can start making a few small changes to do HTML5 development today. Now I'm in Visual Studio and I'm going to create a simple empty web application that I'm just going to call Hello HTML5. So this will be a web application, but it will be completely empty because I want us to start from scratch. Now when the project loads here, we have nothing really but a web config. So let's go ahead and add a web page to this project. And we'll just add a web form and call this default. So that is the default page. And we can see in the page here, and I'm going to increase the font size so we can see this a little bit better, that there's some nastiness at the top. So there's this server tag here that's necessary for web forms, declaring the page language and event wire-ups and code behind, and you can kind of understand that. But this down here gets really weird. So this doc type, and it's HTML, and then there's this public word, not sure what that means, and then there's this long string of double slash separated weird stuff, and then a URL. I don't even know what this is. This is the doc type declaring that this is an HTML document. But one of the most important things you can do, and the first thing you should do to start doing HTML5 development, is to get rid of this thing. And instead, we're just going to use the new HTML5 doc type. And it's just an exclamation mark, and then doc type, and then HTML. And then I can just remove this slash here because HTML5 doesn't need this closing tag. And the HTML declaration tag doesn't need to be closed there. And then the next thing that I see is this XML namespace, and I'm just going to go ahead and remove this. This is not necessary for HTML5, so I'm just going to go ahead and take this out. So you can see that much of HTML5 is really just slimming down and getting rid of some of the fluff and the things that aren't necessary and making things much easier. I'm going to go ahead and come down here into the form tag here, and I'm going to add some semantic tags. So I'll add a header, and you can see the Visual Studio recognizes this tag header in the IntelliSense. And that's because up here, the schema validation is set to HTML5. Now, if you don't have this up here in your dropdown, it's probably because you're using Visual Studio 2008 prior to SP1. And there will be some available downloads in the written content for this to help you get this in Visual Studio if it's not there for you. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this header, and I'm going to add a section underneath it. And then in the section, I'll add an article. And then at the very bottom, we'll put a footer. There we go. And just a little bit of content here. And then I'll just put the copyright information in the footer. And then in the middle, I'm going to need to add some lorem ipsum text. Just some filler text for demonstration purposes. I'm going to add some filler text to the article here. And I'm going to use my favorite lorem ipsum generator. And just copy some of this text in here. And paste it in the article. And then I'll have Visual Studio clean this up just a little bit. So there we go. I've got 2 paragraphs of text and some semantic tags. Let's go ahead and run this and see how it looks. So the application's loaded, and really it's just text on a page. There's absolutely nothing special about this at all. We have the header here, and we have 2 paragraphs of article text, and then we have the copyright footer. But I'm going to open up the F12 developer tools here, and I'm going to change the browser mode to IE7. And you'll notice that IE7 does just fine with those semantic tags. Everything is displayed just as it was before. But let's see what happens when we add a little bit of style to this application using a style sheet. So I'm going to come back to Visual Studio and stop the application. And then I will add a style sheet here to the project, adding a new item. And then I will add a style sheet. I'm just going to call this style. And then in the style, I just want to add a simple style for the article portion. So I'll take the article tag and give it a background color. And we'll just make that salmon. There we go. Just give us a nice background color there. And then in the default page, I want to add this CSS file. And Visual Studio, of course, makes this easy. I can just drag this in underneath the title here. And it's already linked in and ready to go. So let's go ahead and run this. And we now have some nice salmon background for our article. If I go over here and I open up the developer tools again, and we change the browser mode to IE7, you'll notice something very interesting happens. And that is that we lose the background, the salmon background, altogether. It's just gone. And the reason for this is that IE7 and 8, for that matter, do not recognize semantic tags. And while they will display them, they won't style them without actually us adding a polyfill. Now, polyfill is very simple. It just is a matter of creating an element with JavaScript, and then IE7 and 8 will style it. But there's something that makes this very easy, and that's Modernizer. So let's go ahead and add this Modernizer to our application. So I'm going to go out to NuGet and add a library package reference. Click Online, and then I'll search for Modernizer. There it is. Install this and close. And you can see that Modernizer is just a JavaScript file, and it's in the scripts folder here. So we'll just add this to the head of the page and run this application. Alright, so here's the application. I'll open the developer tools and I'll change the browser mode to IE7. And you can see that the salmon background color is persisted and recognized by IE7 and additionally by IE8. So that's really nice. Modernizer giving us some very nice functionality right out of the box. Another thing to note about Modernizer is that it injects these classes into the document. So into the head, the HTML tag. So it injects this no dash and then something. So no application cache, no SVG, no inline SVG. This is telling us that these HTML5 features are not available. If I go over to Internet Explorer 9, you can see it changes a little bit. So now we have canvas. We do have canvas text. There's post message, geolocation, some nicer HTML5 things. If we go back to IE7, we get a no on virtually everything but JavaScript. So that's been a very quick tour through HTML5. Of course, the idea here is not to understand all of HTML5, but just to understand exactly what it is and what it is not. And next time we'll be looking at diving headfirst into using Kendo UI, which is an HTML5 framework. And we will take everything we've learned with jQuery and with the services and about HTML5, and we'll take Kendo UI and see how we can start building real-world applications. So talk to you next time.